carp survive in salt water. The reason I ask is, in looking at your distribution maps, originally in the Mississippi River only, now you're showing Pearl River and Wolf River, which are completely isolated from the Mississippi Basin. So obviously they got into the Gulf, into the, Lake Pontchartrain, came around through there somehow to get in the river. So they saltwater. Can they live in saltwater?
We were, I don't know if this is working.
Yeah,
We're hearing you.
getting a little reverb.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Okay, is that better?
Yeah.
We were sampling for Gulf sturgeon in the Pearl River, and we used those big mesh gill nets. And sure enough, we ended up catching 9 big head and silver carp and 9 parts per thousand of salinity. And it had already been kind of assumed that they did tolerate some level of salinity, but this just proves it. And apparently what I think happened is that either in the 2008 or the 2011 flood, when they opened up the Bonnie Carey spillway, thousands and thousands of Asian carp went through there into Lake Pontchartrain, went down the Wrigley's, and now they've made their way up the Pearl River. So the question is, can they continue to skip along those Gulf coastal streams and start invading into the Pascagoula all the way down to the Sewanee?
Yeah,
So
you said Wolf River already, so that's further east than Wrigley's and all. You had to go all the way to Ocean Springs, Biloxi to get to Wolf River.
So yes, I think they do have a certain level of salinity tolerance, and that we wouldn't be surprised if they didn't start showing up in more of your coastal drainages.
Any other questions for the panel?
What makes them jump?
The question from the floor is what makes the silver carp jump? And I think a secondary question would be, why don't the big head carp?
I mean, I
honestly don't know. I don't know why the big head carp don't jump. The silver carp, I mean, it's pretty much what y'all have heard. I think they get scared, and that's kind of a defense mechanism to jump. It's definitely they jump behind the boats. I've heard some people say that whether it's a metal boat versus a fiberglass boat, that makes a difference. The speed that you go makes a difference. Pontoon boat make a difference, and I don't really know of any hard data on any of that, but it's definitely just weight behind the boat is what makes them jump. But I don't really know anything more besides that.
I think it's predator avoidance mechanism too. If you look at the shape of their pectoral fins, this is what a colleague of mine, Jan Hoover, has been looking at, is that their fins allow them to jump out of the water. They're shaped a lot like your flying fishes you might see in the ocean, whereas big head carp have a little bit different morphology. But I would not want to see a 100-pound big head carp jump out of the water. We have a hard enough time getting hit by 25-pounders in silver carp. They don't jump in China though. That's what someone told us. I don't know if y'all, but they don't see them jumping in China. So I don't know why they have a tendency to jump here more in the United States than they would there.
Yes, in the back.
This is kind of to dovetail into the earlier question about the die-offs that we've seen of these carp in the fall of the year. It seems to me, from what I've seen, that it's been limited strictly to the carp species when those occurrences come around. That we're not seeing other species, bass, crappie, catfish, or whatever, that are involved in those large-scale die-offs. Has there been any research? I think it was answered earlier that was probably food or oxygen related. I'm just kind of wondering why we wouldn't see other species dying off in the numbers that we see with carp, or is it strictly because there are so many more?
I mentioned something that we found a while ago. We've tried in the past to one of the things we want to do is try to figure out what's causing them to die. And I definitely think there's something with low oxygen in these systems in the fall, especially when normally this time of year the water's pretty low, and so you got a lot of fish congregating. These are big fish that needs to have a high biological oxygen demand, that needs a lot of oxygen. So probably part of it. But yeah, it's weird that it's just the carp that are dying off. And we've tried in the past when we've seen that the fish have started to die off to go and try to catch some that are like right in the stage where they're dying, and actually brought them here to the Catfish Diagnostic Lab and get them to look at it. And they've actually have I think it's Dr. Koo has found like some specific species of bacteria, I believe it is, that is what's killing the fish. And so it could be that, you know, the low oxygen, the habitat is really just stressing these fish out a lot and leading to kind of, that's maybe a secondary cause, and the primary cause is certain bacteria that move in, and the bacteria might, the silver carp might be more susceptible to those bacteria since they're non-native fish, whereas some of our native fish can handle it or something like that.
What bacteria?
Honestly, I don't remember exactly what it was. You remember, Bubba? Yeah, I think Dr. Koo published a paper about that. So,
They did.
I'm not exactly sure what it was, but I think it was something new that really they hadn't found before.
If I could add, had a big silver carp die off below Pickwick Dam, and they did a lot of pathological work, sent a bunch of fish in. It was gas bubble disease, and that's something that really shocked us. Something that we didn't think we'd see in a wild population, but that's what it was attributed to. And they had a huge die-off right there below the dam, but within 3 weeks later, they observed massive numbers of silver carp again in those same areas. So had a huge die-off. Those numbers were quickly replaced.
And I guess that's what my question was leading into. Have we learned anything to even start to think about replicating what it was all about?
Well, from my perspective, and I grew up fishing oxbows, what we see is these huge die-offs late fall, typically when the river falls out, and massive die-offs. But again, because of the cyclic nature of the river, and these fish are very abundant in the Mississippi, once that river comes back up, those oxbows reconnect, we get another influx of silver carp.
Did I also hear you say that they spawn in moving water and not in, you know, let's say a disconnected, stagnant, if you will, oxbow?
They have demersal eggs that will tend to sink to the bottom, but the current then agitates them and keeps them floating, and then they hatch into a larvae in just 2 or 3 days. I mean, they have a very short incubation period, and then once the larvae come out, then they have their own behaviors and they can swim around. So it's that key time to try to keep. The river keeps the eggs from sinking to the bottom where they're smothered or eaten by other fish. So it would be surprising if they would actually successfully reproduce in an oxbow lake.
Yeah, and so in a lot of these oxbows where silver carp are present, it's really that the fish are spawning in the river, and then once they hatch out and they're big enough to swim, they're swimming into the oxbows, and they're using the oxbows as kind of nursery areas to grow to full size. So they're not reproducing in oxbows. Even if you see them year after year after year, we still think they're spawning in the river and then getting in there from that.
Nathan, you mentioned in your speech that Wolf and Bee Lake had carp populations in them,
Mhm.
but also those populations that they weren't reproducing.
Right.
At what point would you think there would be a die-off and they wouldn't be present in those lakes any longer?
Well, in our sampling, we've seen since 2011, our catch rates have declined in terms of the number of fish that we're catching, the number of silver carp, and we're still catching some. We're actually probably going to be going back to sample Bee Lake in the next month or so to look at it again this year. But last year when we sampled, there was definitely less fish than before. Now, of course, the fish are bigger, and so I don't think that you're going to see a drastic die-off, but as they get older, more and more of them die out. So, that was 2011 when they got in, so 12, 13, 14, 15. They're just like 4 years now. I'm hoping in maybe 2 or 3 more years there might be a couple still in there, but not really a whole lot left.
Is anybody studying the economic impact of the number of fishermen that have dropped off because of this fish, nobody now is hardly fishing there. They just quit fishing, and usually you'd have 70 to 100 boats in there a lot of times.
Not as far as I've known. We haven't looked at anything at license sales or anything like that, but I'd definitely say, you know, in a lot of the oxbow lakes, the fishing pressure has declined a good bit.
That's a question from the middle of the room.
Back to Bee Lake and all,
Mhm.
why aren't they reproducing?
They got in there when they got in from the river, and so, like Dr. Kilgore was saying, they gotta have flowing water to keep their eggs up. And when they try to spawn, if the eggs just sink to the bottom, then they don't successfully reproduce. So since they don't have flow through the lake, they're just not able to reproduce. That's just part of their biology. They're really just not designed or adapted to survive in disconnected oxbows like Bee Lake.
Yes.
Nathan, in the Moon Lake where they can swim the Moon Lake from the river, but there's no actual water flow there, is it? What would be the situation with the eggs and the spawning there?
Yeah, I really don't know. I think the fish that are in Moon are probably coming in from, I guess, the Yazoo Pass or somewhere like that. And so I would think they would probably, as long as there's that connection, there'll still be fish migrating back up in there. But really at Moon Lake, we haven't seen just the huge abundant numbers as in some of the other oxbows, like some of the river oxbows, like DeSoto. There seems to be a lot more in DeSoto than in Moon. So maybe, you know, there's not quite as much access to those fish in Moon.
I would like to say Dr. Glenn Parsons from Ole Miss, one of his graduate students was doing a study on paddlefish, and they tagged about 20 paddlefish with ultrasonic transmitters, and every one of those fish left and went down Yazoo Pass, and then one of them was captured about 400 miles away on the Mississippi River later. So we know that there's movement in and out of Yazoo Pass into Moon Lake.
They captured one, I think, west of Kansas City, which would have to go all the way to Vicksburg to get in the river. So then turn north, so that's like a 1,200-mile trip or something. Another question along that line, Quentin Phelps was talking about the gar and the Asian carp. Has any studies been done about, say, what happens with alligator gar and Asian carp?
I don't know. I mean, Quentin may know something, but I do know that has been discussed.
Of the Asian carp?
Well, yeah, alligator gar are a native fish species to the Delta, and they used to be a lot more abundant than they are now. And so, like, I mean, everybody knows alligator gar get really, really big to where they could eat a 20, 30-pound Asian carp. So, you know, that's an idea, and we've thought as a department about, you know, reintroducing these alligator gar into some of these native systems, and maybe that would help. And I don't know of any data that would prove one or another whether that would work or not. But.
Yes, sir.
Since we would serve catfish and both fish for lunch, I got a similar question. The amount of research and work that went into genetically altering catfish to make it a little more palatable and increasing the rate at which we can get it to the marketplace, was there anything, or is there any research with the carp along those same lines, maybe look at some of the reverse trends as it relates to the behavior of the carp, and or maybe even slowing down the rate of growth to be more compatible with this market if you're not looking at international or global markets? Any research as it relates to genetics is basically what I'm saying of the carp.
A lot of research has been done recently on the hybridization between the two species. That there's extensive hybridization going on between the big heads and the silvers, and you now catch intermediate forms of them. They still may be viable, though. I mean, I'm not saying that they're sterile. There has been talk as one deterrent is creating this daughterless carp, where you manipulate the sex, and that you have all males, and so, and then they begin to reproduce with others, and eventually, you have a decline in the females, which would then lead to a decline in the population. But in order to do that, that would have to be going on for years and years and years, and so it's a long shot. It's been used with other species, but I think it's a long shot for the Asian carp. That's all the genetic research I know, other than eDNA, the environmental DNA that they use to detect. Take a water sample and you can get a marker, an Asian carp marker, and you can kind of determine where they've been based upon their DNA that's been scattered out in the water.
Any other questions from the floor? Yes.
I have one on, to make, lemonade out of the lemon. What is the, is Moon able to, are they reaching capacity production? Or, you talked about the unconventional methods with the nets, and I've seen them in like Beulah, but, are there any incentives for fishermen to, what's the cost per ton or per pound? Could you give us some insight on that?
No, Moon River, they're not at full capacity as far as fish that they could handle. They have a very large factory, and they can handle a lot of tonnage of fish. The commercial fishing industry has really gone down over the past several decades, and so the amount of commercial fishermen out there now that are fishing, I don't think we have that many commercial fishermen that could even meet their demands at this point in time. With any business, there's cost and input, what they can afford to pay a fisherman per pound, and what the fishermen are wanting per pound and things like that. That's out of my realm. That's a business thing that they would have to deal with. But I think one thing just to kind of keep in mind, though, is they are an outlet for the existing commercial fishermen. They're there and provide another opportunity for this bycatch, because when they're out there setting nets, Asian carp make up the majority of their harvest. Now they have someplace to take it to.
I'll mention along that lines, I think probably just trying to increase the commercial fishing pressure on them is one of the best ways to deal with them that we have right now. And really just the prices that can be paid for the fish right now are low enough, or too low for a lot of people just to get into it and start fishing for them. In other states, I know in Kentucky, they have a big Asian carp processing plant there, and the state actually subsidizes some of the cost. So they'll add, I think it's like 8 cents a pound on top of 10 cents a pound that the anglers, the commercial fishermen are getting for it. And so the state, and I'm not sure exact mechanism, but they're subsidizing to try to provide more incentive for anglers to get out there. And so that's something for us to look at as a state on a long-term thing. If we want to increase the harvest, we might can look at something like that, adding a subsidy on the fish.
Paul, how much? I have two questions again. How much Asian carp is being processed in the United States? I don't care if it's exported or eaten, but do we have a number for the amount that's processed? And then the second question would be, if it's not proprietary, how much is Moon River processed a week, month, year, whatever they want to do?
Yeah, that would be something that they would have to answer. I'm not as aware. I don't know of any figure as far as how much is being processed in the United States. That's
There's got to be one.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm not aware. And as far as how much Moon River produces per month, per day, whatever, it varies by season and by how many fishermen they have bringing them fish. There's a lot of variation in that. I don't know. That's a question that they'd have to answer.
Y'all never seen any NAS numbers or anything on carp? I've never. You got to have one, don't you think, Paul?
Don't make me lie. That's why the experts are here. going to take 2 more questions, and then we'll start to wrap things up. Jim?
Just as a point of clarification / rebuttal, my name is Jimmy Avery with Mississippi State University. I've been involved with numerous Asian carp task forces, probably since the beginning of about 2002, representing aquaculture on those task forces. I and others, of course, represented aquaculture in the National Asian Carp Working Group for several years until that recommendation was passed on to the task force. Mississippi Aquatic Invasive Species Task Force more recently, and also with some of the initial groups in discussions with Moon River. So been involved in aquaculture now 35 years as well. So one thing that we hear promulgated through all these talks is that it's either all this is due to 2 fish farmers in Arkansas or aquaculture in general. And if you kind of look at that time frame when all these Asian carps were really kind of being introduced, most of that was in the mid-70s. And there was a lot of interest in that time by a lot of different federal and state agencies in looking at alternatives to chemicals. And so whether it be bringing grass carp in to cut down on herbicide applications across the U.S., or silver carp to be brought in to cut down on tertiary treatment of sewage lagoons. So if you look at that, yes, probably that first import citation that came through there was for an Arkansas fish farm. But that interest by an Arkansas fish farm was to supply fish to EPA, to the National Biological Survey, to Illinois' Natural History Survey, all these federal and state agencies across the U.S., as far away as Florida, Illinois, Michigan, all these places were receiving essentially silver carp produced by these early fish farms. So the number always gets put around out there that, yes, these fish started escaping in 1990 through some very, very well and correctly documented floods. But there's also historical records that these fish were leaving sewage lagoons in the late 70s. They were leaving national fish hatcheries in the 80s. So this is even though this is probably an aquaculture experience through probably the largest single loss, you have to kind of think here that this has led to what a lot of other introductions of alien species have done. In almost every case, whether it's kudzu or Asian species, there was a reason that was brought in here, okay? And it was to solve some other problem. And so if you look at, I would urge you not to look at fish farms and say that you're the reason that I don't have crappie in Belay, okay? There is a national interest in those animals for a long time that were for a very, very good purpose. If any of you read Silent Spring, that caused a lot of different agencies across this country to say we've got to do something about this. And silver carp, and if you look at once that some of these agencies were not able to establish a food fish market for silver carp. To be honest with you, most Americans didn't want to eat them in the 70s. Most people don't want to eat them in 2015. Okay, so we never were able to get a food fish market established for that. So it all kind of dwindled down. There was only one person making silver carp at that time. You get into the early 90s. And every fish that he produced went to another federal or state agency, either to do research on, to use in tertiary treatment lagoons or these kind of things. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that. That has been promulgated in almost every talk I ever seen about Asian carp, and just wanted to say that there were other interests out there besides some greedy fish farmer in Arkansas. Two of them, yeah. They were brothers.
Thank you, Jimmy. We'll take one last question from the floor.
The gentleman up there a minute ago, he was saying that he hated for a 100-pound big-headed carp to jump in the boat. Do big-headed carp get bigger than the silver carp?
Oh, yes,
Yeah,
much bigger.
they get real big.
I did see someone had like a 90-pound, but I've never seen, the largest silver carp I've seen is like 30 pounds. But we recently collected one that was a little over 100 pounds out of Moon Lake. She had 2 million eggs, and it was the largest one, and it was No, it's
Yeah.
big head.
Oh, big head.
Big head carp that was 12 years old.
You say Moon Lake?
Moon Lake, yes. We got them out of Moon Lake.
2014.
You said big head, 100-pound big head, in silver.
100-pound, yeah.
Most of the silver carp, yeah, they get 30, 40 pounds, you know, that's about their max. And there might be a few that get a lot bigger than that, but that's about average. The average size of a big head is a lot bigger than the average size of silver.
Well, the big head not good to eat, like they.
No, they're the same as the silvers.
The main thing is they got lots of bones in them. You can't just fillet them out. So both of them, yeah.
All right, we have one last comment from the floor, and then we're going to wrap things up.
I love to fish, and I grew up fishing oxbows. And there's few things guaranteed in life more than the Mississippi River at the Vicksburg gauge, 16 feet, 23 feet on a slow follow. I'm gonna go to Showtar and I'm gonna catch a lot of fish. I haven't been able to do that in 2013 and 2014. It's been terrible. I will say that this year, in August and September, I started getting reports from Deer Park down in Louisiana, from Showtar and Albemarle, from Ferguson, and from Tunica for bass and white perch. First time we've gotten good reports in the last 2 years. So I'm anxious to see what my staff finds over the next few years. You know, we know the silver carp have an impact, but it appears in some of these connected oxbows that the sport fish populations may be hopefully turning around.
I want to thank everybody here for their interest and coming out to hear the speakers today. Again, thank you so much to Moon Lake